You are what you eat. And then we'll have the last lecture, that is the importance of a spiritual master. The importance of a spiritual master and learning to differentiate between fake godmen and genuine gurus. So the last lecture will be learning the importance of a spiritual master and learning to differentiate between fake godmen and genuine gurus. These will be the topics that will be discussed today. So, are we ready? Finished on? Okay. In a New York State reformatory, a very interesting experiment was carried out. And in this experiment, they wanted to determine the effect of diet on human behavior. So in this New York State reformatory, they conducted an experiment to determine the effect of diet on human behavior. And what they did was that they divided the reformatory into two parts. Half the inmates who were imprisoned there were given a diet consisting of meat and refined foodstuffs. So half the inmates of that reformatory were given a diet of meat and refined foodstuffs. And the other half of the reformatory was fed on a diet consisting of vegetarian food and unrefined foodstuffs. So to determine the effect of diet on human behavior in a New York State reformatory, an experiment was carried out where half the reformatory was fed on meat and refined foodstuffs, and the other half of the reformatory was fed a diet consisting of vegetarian diet which was also natural and unrefined. After 3 months, they objectively viewed the behavior of the inmates of the reformatory, and the results were surprising. The results were absolutely surprising. In that half which had been fed meat and refined foodstuffs, in that half of the reformatory that had been fed meat and refined foodstuffs, they found that the behavior as determined by breaking of the rules and regulations of the reformatory showed aberrations of up to 80%. That is, 80% of those who were eating meat, a full 80% of those who were eating meat and refined foodstuffs broke the rules and regulations of the prison, of the reformatory. Whereas in that half of the reformatory who were fed vegetarian food and non-refined foodstuffs, they found that hardly 5% of these inmates broke the rules and regulations of reformatory. So this experiment is one of the many experiments conducted on determining human behavior as affected by diet. And it showed very clearly, it also showed very conclusively, that when one eats a diet consisting of meat and refined foodstuffs, the natural behavior of the human being becomes altered towards criminal behavior, towards violence. Whereas if you eat vegetarian foodstuffs, if you eat non-refined foodstuffs, your behavior in fact becomes more calm, more peaceful and more natural. I remember relating this experiment to an officer in the Bombay police. So when I related this experiment to an officer in the Bombay police, he told me, I am not surprised. So I said, why are you not surprised? He said, because I am working in the Bombay police, so I know what is the effect of meat on human behavior. So I said, how do you know what's the effect of meat on human behavior by being in the Bombay police? So he said, I'll tell you a very interesting statistic. So I said, what is it? He said, do you know that in Bombay city there is a meat-eating community that forms only 10% of the population. In Bombay city, there is a meat-eating community that forms only 10% of the population. Yet, this meat-eating community is responsible for 87% of violent crime in Bombay. He said, just try to figure it out for yourself. That here you have a meat-eating community that forms only 10% of Bombay's population, yet this same community is responsible for 87% of all violent crime that takes place in Bombay city. And on the other hand, he said, you take a community like the Jains, who do not even eat onion and garlic. Now this community does not, although it forms a larger proportion of Bombay's population, it does not figure in the statistics of violent crime at all. Let's forget about other crime. At least in violent figure at all. So he said, this is an interesting statistic, and you should understand that by eating meat, your natural behavior becomes altered towards criminal behavior. Because by the law of karma, you have this law of karma which states that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. So if you are responsible for violence, either directly or indirectly responsible for violence, then violence must enter your life. How is it possible for you to eat the product of violence and then live a life that is free of violence? If you are eating products of violence, violence must enter your life. Either it will enter your life in deed, or it will enter your life in word, or it will enter your life in thought. But violence must enter your life. In fact, I remember last year, there was in the center page of the Times of India, they published an interesting scientific conducted where they showed amino acids that came from meat, that some of the amino acids that came from meat had a structure that irritated the lining of the brain. It irritated the meninges. That by eating meat, those amino acids that were derived from meat irritated the linings of the brain or the meninges, thereby to more irritable and more restless mind. In fact, you don't need to hear all this from the Bombay police. I remember my friend near Pune, he bought 2 Doberman dogs. And these Doberman dogs, he had them and sent them to Pune to guard the factory. But they were not very violent and not very vicious. They were very good guard dogs. And if certain entered the very quick and fast in cornering him, they did not show that viciousness and violence that is peculiar to their species. He was passing by the gate, tried to bite him. It's only when he crossed over the factory that they showed their mettle. Why is it that my dogs are so calm and peaceful unless they're called upon to defend the factory? So in fact, what he did was he asked his trainer. So his trainer said, my dear friend, if you want your dog to be really vicious, if you want your dog to be really violent, if you want your dog to bark and growl and snarl at the drop of a pin, if you want him to be vicious when he sees somebody, you should start feeding him meat. I know you're a vegetarian, and I know that you're feeding your dog vegetarian food stuff. Therefore, you cannot get that degree of violence from your dog that you would get if you fed it meat. So it is by eating meat that actually you develop a violent temperament. In fact, it's also now been proved, in fact, reading in a scientific journal, that we are discovering more and more of neurotransmitters in the brain were hardly known of 10 years ago, 20 years ago, more and more of them. When you drink buttermilk, what happens is that you get a release of neurotransmitters which actually brings about drowsiness. Sleepy when you drink buttermilk because certain neurotransmitters are released that actually bring about drowsiness. So also now it has been effectively proved. Eat a vegetarian happens. When you eat a vegetarian diet, in your stomach, from the lining of your gut, you get the secretion of endorphins. You get the secretion of endorphins and enkephalins. And these neurotransmitters bring about peaceful and calm mind. Eating vegetarian diet, what is, you get the release of neurotransmitters from the gut, and transmitters from the gut, which are endorphins and enkephalins, actually calm mind. So these are actually scientific studies to show that by eating meat actually you become more restless, you become more thought, word and deed, and also by eating a vegetarian you do become a more peaceful, more calm and more stable person. Of meat on the mind. The mind is dreadful. Because can you imagine when an animal is slaughtered, what is the condition? Animal is kicking and struggling, frustration and fear, and all its endocrine organs are frustration and fear in the bloodstream, and in that meat, and that is the meat that you eat. So you are eating all that is struggling, and bones are meat which you eat. Naturally your mind will be disturbed. At least think of your body. Because in actual fact, body, know that the human body is eating meat, and the human body for eating a vegetarian diet. You consult, you see length of the gut, that is, you see the length of the intestine of a vegetarian animal. The length of the intestine of the vegetarian animal is about 12 times, 8 to 12 times the length of this. Same in a human being. In the human being also, intestine is 8 to 12 times the length of the trunk. Just an animal like a cow. If you take a lion, if you take a meat-eating animal, what do you find? You find that it is very short. It is only 3 times the length of. Why is it so short? Because when you eat meat, what happens? Putrefact meat have to be expelled from your body as fast as possible. Therefore, God has given a meat eater a short gut, so that the meat that it eats, when it putrefies, it doesn't stay in the body for a long time. It goes out very fast. Vegetarian animal designed by God to eat vegetarian foodstuffs eats meat. Putrefactive products of that meat, they remain in the intestine, and actually they cause disease. I remember my cousin had come from America, so he told me that he'd become a vegetarian. Become a vegetarian because you know, he said. I said, you know what? He said, you know, eating meat you get nitrosamines, which are, they act on your large bowel and give rise to cancer. So I said, I know that. You're an engineer, and being an engineer, how do you know so much what happens to meat and how nitrosamines are formed and how it acts on your large bowel to get cancer? Not only me who knows that, any man in America knows that. Why do you say that? He said, do you know when Ronald Reagan was diagnosed, malignant polyp was removed from Ronald Reagan's intestine? All the TV stations all over showed, and when all the TV stations in America showed bowel cancer, the one factor that they headlined was that the bread is known to cause nitrosamines, which are the degradation products, and these act on the large bowel, giving rise to bowel cancer. One fact, it's not only a fact known to scientists who are interested in cancer, but it's a well-known fact. Interested in health, if you are interested even a little bit in your health, you should understand that meat, you are increasing your chance of getting cancer. And if you take a map, see those countries where bowel cancer is one of the major causes of death, countries where there is maximum amount of meat eating. The countries where incidence of large cancer, you will large. Actually, by meat also increase your cholesterol. By eating meat, you also increase your cholesterol content. You increase of coronary artery disease. Why is it that coronary bypass surgery is perhaps one of the most surgery? eaten. In fact, in the association, they made a statement that 90% disease in United States, which is responsible for all deaths in America, 50% of all deaths in America are caused, 90% or more of that heart could be vegetarian. That means if America became vegetarian, and of the heart would be diminished of 50% of the deaths in America. And now we of them because in their footsteps. When they become smart, what become dumb, because we are always 20 years behind these things they did 20 years. Now that they are reducing their cigarette consumption, what promote. That's why you get the latest brands here. Why? Why do they have collaborations here in India? Because nobody is smoking them there. People have. Therefore, they tell you, come on, guys, you're a little dumb, you might start smoking. So also, now in America, more and more people are becoming vegetarian. More and more people are becoming vegetarian because they have realized a vegetarian diet. They are protecting themselves to a large extent from eating a vegetarian diet. They are actually diminishing their incidence. And in this way, they are actually promoting their health. And also physiologists have proven that a meat, what happens is his stamina go down. Therefore, long distance runners often have a vegetarian diet because it helps them to run for time and play for a longer time. These are all scientific. Unfortunately, we are unaware of them. Therefore, we think that, aha, how wonderful, let's eat meat. And it's not that you get your nutrition only by meat. As a matter of fact, by a combination of vegetarian foods, you can get more than adequate protein, more than adequate nutrition. You don't have to take part in violence to get your nutrition. For example, if you simply rajma and roti and paratha, that rajma and paratha contains as much protein as the same size of steak. If you take soya bean, that contains 1.5 times the amount of protein that is contained in the same size of meat. And these things do not contain cholesterol. These things do not cause heart disease. Something like pork. Pork is 50% fat. 50% of pork is fat. So what happens when you eat pork? You are eating 50% cholesterol. And all that stuff is lining your coronary vessels. So think of that. In the future, you have to go in for a cardiac bypass, for a coronary bypass. So forget about your mind. Even if you are not so interested in having a peaceful mind, at least think about your body. Because in actual fact, to even look after your body properly, you have to follow the laws of God. God has given you a body which is designed for eating vegetarian food. He's not given you a body designed for eating meat. So eat food which God has designed your body for. Eat vegetarian food. Because the law of karma is always there. If you eat meat and you love to eat meat, you can't give it up, God in course of time will give you a body with which you can relish meat. He will give you the body of a meat-eating animal. Then you can relish meat without committing sin. You can relish meat without getting heart disease. You can relish meat without getting colonic cancer. But why are you heading for that fate? Instead, God has given this human body for God realization. He has given this human body which is designed for eating vegetarian food. So that is what you should be doing. In fact, in the Chandogya Upanishad it has been mentioned that all food that you eat is divided into 3 portions. What are these 3 portions that your food do? The Chandogya Upanishad says that the most coarse portion of the food that you eat forms your stool. The most coarse portion of the food that you eat, it forms your stool. The middle portion of the food that you eat, it goes to form your flesh. The Chandogya Upanishad says the food that you eat is divided into 3 portions. The most coarse portion forms your stool. the middle portion forms your flesh, and the subtle portion of the food that you eat, that subtle portion of the food that you eat, it goes to form the texture of your mind. That subtle portion of the food that you eat, it goes to form the texture of the mind. Therefore, you should understand that all food that you are eating on your body, but it also has an effect on your mind. Now, how to explain this to you? How will you best understand this? For example, if two people take the same paints, oil paints, suppose they have oil paints and they have a brush and both of them are given the same canvas, and they're asked to paint the same picture or the same scenery or the same person, although both of them have been given the same paints, both of them have been given the same canvas and the same brush, the two pictures can never be alike. The two pictures they paint can never be alike, because one will paint according to his ability, another will paint according to his ability, and what painting will be the texture of the artist's mind. Not so much the paint or the brush or the canvas, but what's in the artist's mind will come across on the canvas. So the food that we cook, if the food that is cooked by a person with a pure mind, what happens is those sattvic qualities in his mind also enter into the food stuff that he cooks. Whereas if food is cooked by somebody who has got tamasic qualities or rajasic qualities, those qualities will also be seen in the food. So the subtle part that you eat, you are eating the texture of the food which is cooked by the person who cooks that food, the person who cooks that food. That the cook's mind directly influences you. I'll give you an example of this. In fact, when I conducted this course the first time, somebody gave me an example. He said, what you said is 100% true. Because he says, my uncle related this story to me, and if you relate this, maybe people will understand it better. So his uncle was a very strict person as far as his diet was concerned, because he was spiritually inclined. He only ate at the house of people who had sattvic people preparing the food. And in this way he kept his mind very pure and uncontaminated. So one day he went to his friend's house on a visit out of Bombay, and after dinner he went to sleep. And in the night he had a dream that he was committing a murder. In the night he had a dream that he was committing a murder. So when he woke up in the morning, he was shocked. He said, I have lived such a pious and clean life, and although I have lived such a pious and clean life, I should dream in the night that I have committed a murder. There must be something wrong. So he went down and he inquired, and he found that their cook had changed, that the old cook was no longer there, he had gone on leave, and he had appointed a new cook in his place temporarily. So they called that new cook, and they questioned him and questioned him and questioned him, and finally that cook finally revealed his secret. He was actually imprisoned for murder. This cook had been imprisoned for murder, and after many years of imprisonment he was let out for good behavior. And since he couldn't get a job anywhere, he approached this man from his village who said, you can work as a cook for a few days. And so he understood the secret why he had the dream that he committed a murder, because in fact he was eating food that was cooked by a murderer. So it is not only in the product of the food that you eat, that if you eat the products of violence like meat, that you get disturbed. But even if you eat vegetarian foodstuffs which have been cooked by somebody whose mind has a texture of violence or different qualities like tamasic or rajasic qualities, you will acquire those qualities in your mind. This is the statement of the Chandogya Upanishad. But of course, there is something that goes beyond all this. There is something that crosses all beyond all this. What we are talking about today is we are talking about prasad. Now what do we mean by prasad? Prasad is not ordinary food stuff. It is something that is transcendental to ordinary food stuff. In fact, I myself never understood the miracle of prasad until I met my spiritual master, Srila Kirtananand Swami Bhaktipad. So one day I asked him, I said, what is this that they call prasad? What is this peculiar thing that they call prasad? Because I had heard so much about the prasad, and I had been told so many stories about prasad that I was very keen on knowing what this prasad was. For example, in 1970, when I was, the only exposure to this Hare Krishna movement was through magazines which were talking about it. I remember reading the Illustrated Weekly of India, and in the Illustrated Weekly of India they had featured a story on the Hare Krishna movement which was sweeping the Western world, and they talked about devotees in the London temple in particular, and they had many photographs of the London temple and English devotees there. And I found something very peculiar. What did I find? I found that practically each of these devotees, these English devotees who had joined the temple, had joined because they were attracted by the prasad. So I remember talking to my father. I said, see what crazy religion this is. That practically everybody has joined the temple after eating prasad. And some of the interviews were featured there. One person said that I like the samosas and I like the gulab jamun. And of course later on I like the philosophy also. Another devotee, English devotee, said that I joined the temple because I like the prasadam. That's why I really joined the temple. But then later on I discovered what a wonderful movement it was. So I laughed at my father and I told him, I said, see what this crazy religion is. In fact, they say that they're a religion, but in fact practically everybody is joining them after eating food, after eating the food that they serve. So what kind of religion is this? So we both had a big laugh over it. In fact, I remember saying that this religion is often referred to as the kitchen religion because their devotion flows from the kitchen. I also remember fairly recently a very responsible person was speaking to some young friends of mine, and he was telling them that, see, it's all right if you go to attend these lectures by the Hare Krishnas, no problem. You can go and hear them. But whatever you do, don't for heaven's sake eat the food that they give. So my friends, they asked, what's wrong? I mean, what's wrong if we eat the food that they give? He says, don't you know that it's one thing to listen to their lectures, it's another thing to eat their food? So what happens if you eat their food? So he says, you know, they put drugs in that food. So when they put drugs in that food and you eat that food, you become addicted to it. You become addicted to it and thereby they brainwash you. So they put drugs in that food. So I asked my spiritual master Kirtananand Swami Bhaktipad that what is this that people are talking so much about prasad? People join the movement, they say, because they like the prasad. And some people are afraid to eat the prasad because they say that if we eat it, we will be drugged. So Bhaktipad explained to me. He said, you are a doctor. So since you are a doctor, it should be very easy for you to understand. So he said that in your hospital, if you have a patient who has open TB, if you have a patient who's got open tuberculosis, will you let anyone else eat from his plate? I said, no, certainly not. If any patient of mine has got open tuberculosis, you can be sure that we will not let anyone eat from his plate. So he says, why? I said, because a person who's got open tuberculosis is coughing out TB bacilli all the time. And the food that he's eating and the plate in which he eats, it will be contaminated by this TB bacilli, so that if you eat that food, you will all be consuming portions of his saliva or sputum which contain the TB bacilli, and you will also get TB. So he said, see, you have understood already. Just like if you eat from a TB patient's plate, you can get TB, so also prasad works the same way. He says that when we offer food to God, what happens? Prasad means what? Prasad means food that has been offered to God with love and devotion. And when we offer food to God with love and devotion, what happens? God actually partakes of that food. And when God partakes of that food, what happens? God's transcendental saliva is mixed with that food. Just like the TB patient's saliva and sputum is mixed in that food, when you offer that food to God, God's transcendental saliva and God's transcendental sputum is mixed in that food. And when you eat that food which has been tasted by God, you also consume that transcendental saliva, you also consume that transcendental sputum. And thereby you get infected. But what do you get infected by? Just like when you eat from a TB patient's plate, what happens is that you get infected with TB. When you eat from a plate that has been offered to God, from which God has eaten, you get infected by bhakti. That is the difference. That if you eat from a TB patient's plate, you get infected by TB. If you eat from a plate which has been eaten by the Lord, food which has been offered to Him with love and devotion, then you also get infected, but you get infected by bhakti. He's saying that is the miracle of prasad. Of course, you have many skeptics. That how do you know that God eats that food? You are offering with love and devotion, but how do you know that God eats that food? So I remember once Prabhupada was giving a lecture. So when Prabhupada was giving that lecture, somebody asked him, "Oh, you are saying that God is eating that food, but I don't believe you. You may say anything. You may say that God eats that food, but how am I supposed to accept that?" So Prabhupada told him, he said, "I am not saying that God eats that food. God is saying that He eats it." Then he gave him the verse from the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, "Patram pushpam phalam toyam yo me bhakti prachati tad aham bhakti upartam ashnami pratatmana." That if you offer me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, a fruit, a little bit of water, then what happens? I accept it, I eat it. Ashnami means I eat it. The Sanskrit word ashnami means I eat it. So Prabhupada said, Krishna is saying that He eats it. Ashnami pratatmana, I eat it, He says. So who am I to believe? Am I to believe Bhagavad Gita? Am I to believe Krishna who says that He eats it, or am I going to believe you? If the choice is between Krishna and you, I shall believe Krishna. Because in the Bhagavad Gita, He clearly says that He will eat it. But why does He eat it? Does God need to eat food? Actually, God contains everything within Himself. God contains everything within Himself. What is the need for God to be offered some foodstuffs? Why should God actually need to eat that food? God doesn't need to eat that food. But He wants what you are giving along with that food. He wants the love and devotion. In fact, Bhaktipad once again explained it to me. He said, just imagine you have a young son, and one day your young son, he takes money from your wallet. He takes money from your own wallet, and he goes out and he buys some food stuff which you don't normally like to eat. And he comes to you and he offers it to you with love and devotion. And of course you don't like that food much, but just to please him, you eat some food and you know that he's going to eat the rest of it. But still you are very happy. He has taken the money from your own wallet. He has bought some food which you don't like to eat anyway. And still when he offers it to you, you know that you're not going to eat all of it. Mostly he's going to eat it. But still you're overcome with happiness because your son has done that. Why? Because your son has added something to that food. What has he added? He has added love and devotion. So because he has added love and devotion, even though you don't want that food, just to please him, you'll take a bite and tell him, okay son, now we have the rest. That is the attitude of God. God doesn't need to eat anything. He's Atma Ram. He's complete. He's self-satisfied. He contains everything within Him. But when you offer it to Him, and you offer it to Him with love, and you offer it to Him with devotion, He is so pleased, He is so happy because of that love and devotion that you have, that He accepts it and He eats it. In fact, that food that you're offering Him is simply a vehicle to carry your love and devotion. That food that you're offering Him is simply a vehicle to carry that love and devotion that you're offering Him. That is the purpose of offering food to God with love and devotion. So in fact, you might say, how wonderful. Now I have learned the secret of how to please God. So tonight I am going to offer God tandoori chicken. I am going to offer God prawn masala. I am going to offer God sorpotel. Wonderful. But my dear friends, you should understand one thing. That whenever you call somebody to your house to feed them, you should give them what they eat. If you give them something that they don't eat, they're not going to eat it anyway. For example, if you call me to your house for dinner, and I hope that most of you will sometime or the other, and you offer me meat, do you think I'm going to eat meat? Certainly not. I will not eat meat. Because I don't eat meat. So also, if you are offering God a meat dish which He does not eat, He's not going to accept it. He says, Patram, Pushpam, Phalam, Toyam. A flower, a fruit, a little water. He doesn't say chicken and meat and fish and eggs. He doesn't say that. He could have said that. In fact, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it has been clearly said. The Srimad Bhagavatam very clearly says that meat eating forms one of the pillars of sinful life. That meat eating forms one of the pillars of sinful life. In fact, you cannot begin religious life seriously until you actually give up the eating of meat. You cannot begin religious life seriously until you give up the eating of meat, because meat eating destroys mercy. What does religion mean? Religion means to understand that all living entities are part of God, and not only they are all part of God, but they are all equal, they are all spiritually equal. So when you are trying to understand and have love for all living entities, how is it possible if for the sake of your gratifying your tongue, you are putting another living entity into difficulty, you are putting another living entity into harm, and you are committing violence unnecessarily to gratify tongue, when you could get the same foodstuffs simply without committing that degree of violence? So in fact, if you are serious about religious life, you have to give up meat eating. That includes meat, it includes fish, it includes eggs. Yes, even vegetarian eggs. Sometimes people say that, oh, you have non-vegetarian eggs and you have vegetarian eggs. But what do we mean by vegetarian eggs? Just try to understand. A non-vegetarian egg, as you call it, is a fertilized ovum. A non-vegetarian egg is a fertilized ovum, therefore it's a life. But what is a vegetarian egg? A vegetarian egg is an unfertilized ovum. For example, in the human being, if a woman conceives, she has a child, she becomes pregnant. What happens when she doesn't conceive? When the ovum is not fertilized, the ovum is discharged. And when the ovum is discharged, what happens? You get menstruation, you get menstrual blood. Now just try to understand, the same thing is happening with the chicken. When the chicken's egg is fertilized, you get a chick in that egg. When the chicken's egg is not fertilized, what are you eating? You are eating the menstruation of the chicken. That is what you are eating. So when you are eating a vegetarian egg, you are actually eating the menstruation of a chicken. It's considered to be a very low flesh food. That although you might imagine that, aha, how tasty, what wonderful omelets I eat, but actually you are eating the menstruation of a chicken. It's a very dirty, filthy foodstuff. So it's not only that we avoid products of violence, but we also avoid foodstuffs which are tamasic. In the Bhagavad Gita, it has been mentioned that foodstuffs are divided into three portions. You have tamasic foodstuffs, you have rajasic foodstuffs, and you have sattvic foodstuffs. So those foodstuffs which are considered to be putrid, which drag your mind to the level of ignorance, whether they are vegetarian or non-vegetarian, they are to be avoided. Therefore, not only do we avoid eggs, but we also avoid other foodstuffs which drag our mind to the level of passion and ignorance. For example, we also do not eat garlic, we also do not eat onion. Because even onion and garlic, they are actually foods which actually stimulate the lower centers of your brain. They encourage you towards passion and degradation. Therefore, we avoid those foodstuffs, although strictly speaking, these foodstuffs are not non-vegetarian. They may not be non-vegetarian, but because they are tamasic, because they drag your mind into a lower mode, if you are really serious about spiritual life, if you are very keen that you should aspire towards Godhead, then you must give these foodstuffs up. Simultaneously, you must also learn to give up intoxicants, because God does not accept intoxicants. Intoxicants are not accepted by God. Therefore, we cannot offer God intoxicants. Therefore, we cannot eat prasad in the form of intoxicants. Intoxicants include hard liquor, alcohol, not just whiskey or brandy or rum, but also other intoxicants that include beer and wine. This is so what? I don't drink, only at parties. But in actual fact, that alcohol that you're taking is dragging you into the mode of ignorance. Not only does it make you forget about your spiritual responsibilities, it makes you forget about your material responsibilities, your normal moral responsibilities are forgotten. Sometimes people feel that, I need a glass of alcohol to relax. I have a hard day's work and I come back home and I have a glass of alcohol to relax and feel peaceful. I'll feel good about the world when I have a glass of alcohol. Actually, what alcohol does is exactly what leprosy does to the nervous system. You know what a leper has? If you've seen a leper on the road, the leper loses his fingers. You must have seen that lepers, they gradually lose all their fingers. Now, why does a leper lose his fingers? He loses his fingers simply because, not because of the disease. The disease doesn't cause the fingers to fall off. Leprosy does not cause your fingers to fall off. What leprosy does is it deadens the pain. So when it deadens the pain, there is no pain sensation in the hand. So the leper who's walking, he bangs his head against the table. I might say, ouch, and take care the next time. The leper doesn't say ouch because he has no pain. And if he bangs it once, he doesn't feel anything, he bangs it harder the next time. And thereby misusing his hands and ignoring the sensation of pain because it's not absent. What happens is fingers get further and further injured. And because of lack of pain, those fingers gradually get further and further traumatized and eventually fall off. So sometimes we turn to alcohol when we're in trouble, when we're in distress, when we're in stress, when we're worried. Because when we take alcohol, we feel better. Everything is alright with the world. When I take my glass of whiskey, I feel everything is alright with the world. Because alcohol deadens the pain. But what does it do by deadening the pain? It makes you forget about the pain. And by making you forget about the pain, you become a moral leper. You become a moral leper. Because that pain which has been sent to you by God in the form of stress or worry has been sent to you by God for the specific purpose of making you straighten out your life. That if you have worry, if you have tension, if you have distress in your life, it is because you are not living life according to God's laws. Therefore, God sends you this stress, He sends you this tension, He sends you this nervous worry, so that you can think that, why am I living like this? Why do I feel like this? I must straighten out my lifestyle, I must straighten out my life, and thereby I can be more peaceful. But when you take alcohol, you feel everything is fine. You see a drunk man, he lies in the gutter, with his head in the gutter and his feet on the road. He is covered with vomit and stool and urine, and he's stinking of alcohol, and you ask him, how are you? Fine, I'm fine. So that is what alcohol does. It makes you feel that all is fine with the world. But all is not fine with the world. This is not a place where you should be happy. This is not a place where you should remain content. This is a place you should struggle to get out of. This is known by Krishna as Dukh Alayam Ashashvatam. Anityam Asukham Lokam. This is a place of misery where everything is temporary. And if you try to forget the fact that this is a place of misery where everything is temporary by taking alcohol, what happens? You actually gradually become a moral and spiritual leper. You forget about God. And God consciousness and the attainment of Godhead becomes a distant dream. Therefore, intoxicants must be given up. What is the meaning of intoxicant? Intoxication means taking in toxins. Taking in a toxin. So if you take any toxin into your body, that is intoxication. And all these toxins that you take into your body, they are actually the cause of distress. For example, smoking, you take nicotine. That's a toxin you're taking into your body. And when you take that toxin into your body, it has many deleterious effects. Heart disease, cancer. More than 80% of cancer of the lung could be avoided if you stop smoking. If cigarettes were abolished, what would happen? Lung cancer would drop drastically. Cancer surgeons who are operating on the lung would go out of business. So you should learn that you should not take in toxins, including cigarettes. By smoking cigarettes, you not only increase your chance of lung cancer, heart disease, emphysema, all these diseases are increased when you take in cigarette smoke. So you might think that, that's for people who smoke so many cigarettes a day. I just smoke 5 cigarettes a day. So since I smoke 5 cigarettes a day, statistically that's considered to be a non-smoker. But my dear friend, I'd like to tell you one thing, that if you are living in Bombay city, you are already smoking a pack of cigarettes. Why? Because even if you are a non-smoker, just inhaling the pollution of the city is equivalent to smoking a pack a day. So even before you pick up the first cigarette, you are already a smoker. So every cigarette that you add on, it increases your intoxication. Living in the city itself causes so much intoxication because we take it in the form of pollution. When you take that cigarette, what happens? In fact, cigarettes have been compared to coffin nails. You know what's a coffin nail? Coffin is where you put the dead body. And then you bang in nails to seal that coffin. Every cigarette that you're taking, that's a nail in your coffin. It's a coffin nail. So it's not just alcohol, it's not just cigarettes. Even the simple and harmless things that you might think are really harmless. For example, coffee. You might think, oh my, now he's talking about coffee. He's trying to take away my morning cup of coffee. But it's a fact. What can I tell you? I have to tell you the truth. Coffee contains caffeine. And in fact, in America, it has been determined that the incidence of pancreatic cancer is directly proportional to the number of cups of coffee that you drink. This is a scientific fact, that the incidence of pancreatic cancer is statistically correlated, so that it's directly proportional to the number of cups of coffee that you drink. So the more cups of coffee you drink, the higher your chance of developing pancreatic cancer. Yes, tea also. Tea also is a toxin, because tea actually contains tannin. And in fact, some studies have shown that tea has been linked to bladder cancers. Not as strongly as coffee has been linked to pancreatic cancers, but it has been linked to bladder cancers. So actually tea is also a toxin because it contains tannin. So when you take in this tannin, what happens is that you become not only ill because of the toxin you take in, but you become habituated to it. A person who's had his cup of tea, it's very painful for him to give it up. It's very painful. I had an uncle, at 3:30, if he didn't have a strong cup of tea, he would become nervous and irritable. He would become nervous and irritable, he would start snapping and getting angry with everybody because his cup of tea was not ready. Because it's as much an addiction on a smaller scale. This is the same argument that people have now in America. Children are smoking marijuana. And when they smoke marijuana and their father tells them, don't smoke marijuana, they say, so what, you are taking alcohol. It's just a different degree. So what, if you are taking tea and coffee, even then you are taking in toxins. So what's so great if you are taking tea and coffee? I am taking alcohol. It's like that. You must learn to put a stop to all toxins. So not only must you give up alcohol, coffee, tea, yes, pan also. Not so much the pan, but I am talking about the betel nut in the pan. The betel nut that is contained in the pan, that betel nut has been directly linked with head and neck cancer. By eating betel nut, what happens is that you increase your risk of getting head and neck cancer. And the worst form of betel nut, that is pan masala. That is the worst form of betel nut. In fact, it has now been shown that this pan masala that is produced, like from the pocket they produce a big strip. This pan masala is actually the worst possible thing for developing head and neck cancer. In fact, in the conference that was conducted of the head and neck cancers in India and Delhi, they actually sent a letter to the government saying that you must, just like you print on the cigarettes, that smoking cigarettes is injurious to your health because it can cause you such and such diseases. They should print that on all the pan masala also. Because by eating pan masala, you are increasing your chances of submucous fibrosis, which is seen very commonly in people who eat pan masala. In fact, just last year, we had a patient who was a 24-year-old boy. 24-year-old boy, just imagine, with cancer of the cheek. We had a 24-year-old boy who was having cancer of the cheek because of what? Continuous chewing of pan masala. So when you eat your pan contains that supari, that betel nut, and it has 100% been established that this is directly linked with head and neck cancer. So by eating betel nut, of course, along with the pan, you often get tambaku, chuna, this, that, and so many other additives that are in there. And all these things are very, very harmful for you. It's not the leaf that is harmful. Leaf is wonderful, but what you put inside the leaf, that is harmful and poisonous for you. Even a simple thing like chocolate. I see many sour faces in the audience now. I appreciate that because that was one of the last things I gave up. Chocolate itself also contains caffeine. Chocolate itself also contains caffeine. And it also contains theobromine, which is also considered to be an intoxicant. People are addicted to chocolates. People are addicted to chocolates. They can't give up chocolates. Why? What is so difficult about giving up chocolates? Because it contains an addictive substance. Because it contains an addictive substance, because it contains theobromine and caffeine, you must have it. Your body craves for it. Just like you have alcoholics, you have chocoholics. Because it can't stop eating chocolate. So these are some of the foodstuffs that you cannot offer to God, because these foodstuffs are actually not accepted by God. God does not accept toxins. He accepts only food that is beneficial for health. So when I have told you all this, and I have told you that you can't offer God meat, sometimes people come up with a wise argument that, hey, you are saying that you can't offer meat. Of course, when you kill a goat, you're taking a life. But when you take a potato, aren't you taking life also? When you eat a potato, aren't you also taking life? So how can you say that you are actually not taking life? You're eating a potato, you're taking life. I'm eating a goat, I'm also taking life, so we are equal. Of course, this is a very ridiculous argument. There's a big difference between a potato and a goat. And the amount of violence involved in killing a goat and eating a potato is 100% difference. In fact, it has been said that nobody can eat without committing some violence. In the Srimad Bhagavatam it has been said, Ahastani sahastanam apadani chatuspadam phalguni tatra mahatam jiva jivasya jivanam. That just like the weak they live on the strong, one life must live on another. So whether you like it or not, you must live on another life. But the principle is what? The principle is that we live by minimum violence. This is also stated in the next verse, that although you have to live on another life, you understand the basic principle. The basic principle is that you will eat with the minimum violence. For example, if you are locked up in the room with a child and a goat and some vegetables, will you eat the child, will you eat the goat, or will you eat the vegetables? Very simple question. Because you might as well eat the child, or you might as well eat the goat or the vegetables. You are taking life in all the three. But when you eat the vegetables, you are committing minimum violence. It's a minimum amount of violence that you are committing compared to the violence in killing the goat or the violence in killing a child. Of course, it has been said in Srimad Bhagavatam that a day will come when human beings will actually eat their children. In the Srimad Bhagavatam it has been predicted that a day will come when human beings will actually eat their children. And I have also heard of a report that in New York City there is a restaurant where they served cooked fetuses, because there are abortion clinics in that city. And the fetuses that are aborted there, they are sold at a premium to that restaurant, and because the flesh of the human child is so tender, they cook it wonderfully and people actually pay great amounts to eat that food. So this is Kali Yuga, that people are now eating their own children. But just see the violence in killing a child or a fetus, or violence in killing a goat, and violence in killing a vegetable or a plant. It is minimum violence. But it's a fact. I agree with you 100% that even if you are killing a plant, you are incurring karma. There is no doubt of it. No doubt the violence may be minimal. No doubt the karma may be minimal. But even though the karma is minimal, it is karma nonetheless. Therefore, we should learn how to eat food which is akarmic. Now, how do we eat food which is akarmic? That is also stated in the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, He says, Yagna shishta shine santo muchyante sarva kilbishay bhunjate te tva agham papam ye pachante atma karanat. He says that those who eat the remnant of sacrifice, they are protected from sin. Whereas those who eat only for the maintenance of their body, they eat only sin. So, we are not trying to make you vegetarian, don't misunderstand me. It's wonderful to be a vegetarian, but that's not what I'm encouraging you to do. I am telling you to eat a karma-free diet. That means even the vegetarian food that you're eating contains some karma, because it involves violence to some plant, which is also a living, which is also life. But Krishna says that he will accept that life, he will accept that plant, he will accept that vegetable which is offered to him. And because he accepts it as a sacrifice when you're offering it with love and devotion, when you eat that food, Krishna has taken that karma from it. Krishna, by eating that food which you have offered to him in sacrifice, he takes away that minimum karma from it. And the food that you eat which is offered to God, that is akarmic food. So whatever food that you eat which has been offered to God, that is considered to be akarmic, because all the karma has been removed from it. And Krishna only accepts vegetarian food, he does not accept forbidden food. So from the list of sanctioned foodstuffs, Krishna takes away that minimal karma, so that when you eat that food, you get zero karma diet. So that is what I am trying to tell you. Don't become a vegetarian. Become an eater of prasadam, because when you eat prasad, you are getting zero karma. Zero karma, no karma. Although you have taken some life, although there has been some violence even in killing the plant, still the fact remains that because Krishna has accepted it as sacrifice, according to the verse I quoted to you, Yagna Shishta Sine Santo Muchante Sarva Kilbishe, because you are eating the remnant of sacrifices, you are actually saved from sin. Whereas, Bhunjate Tetu Agam Papam Ye Pachante Atma Karanat. Even if you eat vegetarian food, without offering it to God, you are still committing sin. You are still eating only sin. Even if you are eating vegetarian food, eating sin, if you have not offered that food to God, this is the statement of Bhagavad Gita. So you must learn to offer that food to God. Now even in prasadam, there are many qualities of prasadam. What do you mean by qualities of prasadam? Qualities of prasadam means it depends upon the intensity and the degree to which that foodstuff has been imbued with love and devotion to God. For example, if you go to any farm in the movement, the Hare Krishna movement, for example, in New Vrindavan, where they eat only what is grown in that area, they eat only food that is grown in New Vrindavan. They have 5,000 acres, and in that 5,000 acres, what they grow, they eat. There, the very seed that is planted in the ground, it is planted with the love and devotion, it's planted with that consciousness that I am planting the seed for Lord Krishna. That field is irrigated with that idea that it's being irrigated for Lord Krishna. When the grain grows, that grain is cut with the idea that we are cutting this grain for Lord Krishna. Then that grain which is cooked, it is cooked with the idea that I am cooking this grain for Lord Krishna. And finally, when it is offered to Lord with love and devotion, then and then only do they eat it. Therefore, right from the planting of the seed to the eating of the foodstuff, everything has been done with love and devotion. Therefore, that is first class prasadam. Now, those of us who don't have that facility of eating food that has been even sown and reaped with love and devotion, we can go to the market with the idea that I am buying foodstuff for Lord Krishna. So that is one step, little lower, but at least it's a progress that we are going to the market with the idea that we are buying foodstuff for Lord Krishna. And with that love and devotion, we buy that foodstuff and then we cook it with love and devotion and offer it with love and devotion. The third alternative is, of course, that you get foodstuff which you have to cook without knowing where it's come from, and you cook it but still with love and devotion and offer it to God. And of course, the last choice is that suppose you're traveling by plane or you're going somewhere where you don't know where that food has come from, you don't know who has prepared it, you don't know how it has come before you, all you know is that it's vegetarian food and you can eat it. So you offer it to God with love and devotion, saying that, oh God, I don't know where this food has come from, I don't know who's cooked this food, I just have faith that it's vegetarian food that you will accept, so please accept it with love and devotion so that I may be spared from sinful activity and that I don't eat sin. And after you offer it, you eat that. That is the last grade of foodstuff. So we should try to see that the foodstuff that we have is imbued with love and devotion from the very beginning. Then it becomes more and more potent foodstuff. In fact, my spiritual master Bhaktipad always says, it doesn't matter if they're not interested in hearing lectures or they're not interested in kirtan or music, at least to give them some prasad. Because that prasad they're eating will give them a little bit of infection. And that infection that they get, it will infect one of their RBCs, one of their red blood corpuscles, and that will infect the other RBCs, the other red blood corpuscles, and gradually they'll get infected, if not immediately, over a period of time. There may be an incubation period. Incubation period means you get infected, manifest immediately. You eat it now and that infection becomes manifest after 5 years, after 10 years, after some period of time. So he said, doesn't matter, if they're not interested, just make them eat some prasad. That's all that you should do. Therefore, I always tell my friends, I say, if you are intellectual, we have more than 70 volumes of the most profound philosophy. If you want to hear something about it, come and attend these lectures. If you are not intellectual, if you are aesthetically inclined, if you like wonderful music, we have the most wonderful devotional music in all styles. We have it in rock, we have it in pop music, we have it in country. We have all styles of music, Western and Eastern, including Western classical music in devotional music towards Krishna. So we have music in all styles that you can relish if you are aesthetically inclined. But if you are neither intellectual, if you are not even aesthetically inclined, doesn't matter, at least you have some prasad. So you can make progress one way or the other. In fact, Prabhupada, when he was told that his religion was being called the kitchen religion, he was very happy. He said, yes, this is the kitchen religion. This is the kitchen religion. And in fact, he used to insist that everybody who came to see him had a little bit of prasad at least. And the favorites that he would like to distribute was the gulab jamuns, which sometimes he would personally prepare. And those gulab jamuns were so big. They were so big, huge, juicy gulab jamuns with a wonderful rose flavor. And when you put them in your mouth and your tongue pressed them against your palate, they would explode, giving you a wonderful heady fragrance. And they were very, very popular. And Prabhupada used to call these gulab jamuns the bullets of his movement. He used to call them these gulab jamuns, they are the bullets of the Hare Krishna movement. Why? Because once you ate the gulab jamun, you were hit. It was just a matter of time before you fell down. Before you fell victim to Krishna, it was a matter of time. Therefore, he used to call them the bullets of the Hare Krishna movement. Not only that, not only did he call them the bullets of the Hare Krishna movement, but he would also encourage people to eat as much prasadam as possible. He would make them eat and eat and eat and eat. And he would tell aspiring devotees that don't worry, eat as much prasadam as you can eat your way back to Godhead. That all you have to do is to keep eating prasad and finally you can eat your way back to Godhead. This is one valid path by which you can finally eat your way back home, back to Godhead. And actually my spiritual master, he follows perfectly in parampara as far as prasadam is concerned, as well as everything else. And why do I say that? It is because when Prabhupada went to America, he never ate food which was cooked by any devotee. Because he would eat food only from the hands of somebody who was absolutely pure at heart. But the first person whom he allowed to cook food for him, the first person who cooked prasadam to be eaten by Srila Prabhupada was my spiritual master, Srila Kirtananand Swami Bhaktipad. He was considered to be the most pure, therefore he was given the responsibility of preparing the prasadam. And although his name was Kirtananand, because he was spending so much time in the kitchen, instead of calling him Kirtananand, they started calling him Kitchenanand. And in actual fact, one of the first cookbooks of the Hare Krishna movement has been written by my spiritual master. And of course now it's not available, it's a collector's item. But that cookbook, which showed how to cook prasadam and how to offer it with love and devotion, has actually helped to mold the spiritual lives of so many people the world over. So this is the miracle of prasadam. That when you eat this prasadam, actually you get infected. You get infected by love of God. And by being infected by love of God, eventually you acquire bhakti and return home back to Godhead. But what is the meaning of prasad? Prasad means the mercy of the Lord. It is mercy of the Lord. And when you offer it to Him with love and devotion, you should have that faith that Krishna comes and actually eats it. Because He promises it Himself in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, Ashnami pratatmana. He says, I come and I eat it. This is the faith that you must have. Because if you have that much faith, in actual fact, sometimes He actually personally appears and eats it. In fact, there's a very famous story that 500 years ago, there was a very pious Brahmana who went to the house of Jagannath Mishra, and when he was staying there, he started cooking food with love and devotion for Lord Krishna. But before he was about to offer it to his deities, he found that the little child had come and snatched the food and started eating it. Now once it has been eaten and tasted, it cannot be offered. So he started cooking it all over again, this time making sure the child was locked somewhere else. But even then, the child came and ate some food. So he waited until late at night. And he fasted till late at night, and late at night when everybody was sleeping, again he cooked food with love and devotion. And he was offering it in the middle of the night when again the child came and ate that food stuff. So then he was absolutely distraught. He said, I have fasted whole day because I don't eat unless it has been offered to God. And with full love and devotion I am preparing it. Why is it this child is coming again and again and again and eating it and spoiling this offering? At that time the child actually revealed his form as Lord Krishna. That he was none other than Lord Krishna himself, because he had incarnated in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he had come for the specific purpose of gratifying his devotees. So when it was offered with love and devotion, he came actually personally and ate that food stuff. So that is the power of faith, that when you have that faith, in actual fact, Krishna may actually appear and eat that food that you make. Furthermore, actually God is more keen that you should eat it. What is the meaning of prasad? Prasad means mercy. It is mercy. It is mercy given by God. So since it is mercy that is given by God to you, He is very keen that you should receive that mercy. And in fact, there is a very famous story of Shira Chora Gopinath, that there was a great devotee by the name of Madhavendra Puri. And Madhavendra Puri, who was travelling to collect sandalwood, to make sandalwood paste for his deity in Vrindavan, happened to come across another temple of Krishna where Gopinath was the deity. So he heard that to this Gopinath they offer wonderful prasad. The most wonderful prasad is offered to this deity. So he sat down just to see what offerings were made. And when the food was being taken as an offering to him, he found that the most wonderful dish that was being offered was sweet rice. So when he saw that sweet rice being taken to be offered to the deity of Gopinath, he immediately had the thought. He says, I wish I could taste it, because if I could taste it, I could make the same preparation for my deity of Gopal in Vrindavan. So when he had this thought, he realized that it was not a correct thought. Because in actual fact, when you are cooking food and before you offer it to Krishna, nobody is supposed to look at it and say, ah, lovely, lovely. You are not supposed to do that. The food is actually supposed to be covered up, and it should be offered to Krishna without anyone salivating over it or thinking how wonderful it is to eat. And only after Krishna has eaten it are other people allowed to look at it and taste it. So realizing that he had made a faux pas, he actually left the temple and he went to the marketplace and sat down and began to chant, deciding to fast. So in the afternoon, when the priest who had distributed that prasad went to sleep, the deity of Gopinath appeared in his dream, and he told him that there is a great devotee of mine by the name of Madhavendra Puri, and Madhavendra Puri is sitting in the marketplace and he is chanting and he is fasting. I have stolen a pot of sweet rice for him. Please go and give it to him. So the priest in his dream, he told the Gopinath, the deity, that how can I give that sweet rice? I have already distributed all the pots to the devotees in the temple. So Gopinath tells him in the dream that on the right side of the altar, beneath the altar cloth, I have hidden one pot of sweet rice specially for Madhavendra Puri. So when the priest gets up, he goes to see whether the dream is true or not. And sure enough, under the cloth he finds that one pot of sweet rice has been hidden by the deity of God. So he takes that pot of sweet rice, he goes to the marketplace and he calls out to Madhavendra Puri. He says, oh Madhavendra Puri, most fortunate soul, Gopinath has personally hidden a pot of sweet rice for you. And when Madhavendra Puri hears it, he is ecstatic and overcome. And he eats that pot of sweet rice which has been stolen for him by God. And when he eats it, he is overcome with prema or love of God. His hair stands on end, his tears start rolling down his cheeks. He shudders with ecstasy. And even that mud pot which has been stolen by the deity of Gopinath, he keeps it with him. And he breaks it into many small pieces, and every day he eats a small portion of that mud pot, getting wonderful ecstasy every time he eats it. So that is the nature of God, that God not only will actually personally appear to eat the prasad that you offer him, but also he is very anxious that you should have it. This is very, very important. But also God wants that if you are a devotee of God, it's not only that you should hog all the prasad for yourself. He wants you to share the prasad with people. That by sharing prasad with people, you actually please God much more. By sharing prasadam with others, you actually please God much more. In fact, this is an injunction in the scripture that if you are a householder, you should not sit down to eat unless you have gone to the door and seen that there is nobody who is hungry within earshot. And if there is anybody who is hungry, what to speak of human being, even if it's a bird or an animal, you should first feed that creature, and after satisfying the hunger of everybody within earshot, only then should you sit down to eat. Because it's not only that you should give food, but you should share that love of God with as many people as possible. And there is a famous story of King Rantidev. He was a very saintly person. And he starved without food for many days because he was very poor. He was in great poverty. And he starved without food for many, many days. And at the end of his long fast of starvation, somebody came and gave him wonderful prasad, cooked in ghee, wonderful vegetables and grain and cereals and milk and water. And when he was about to start eating, a pious Brahmana came to the door. So immediately invited him in. He gave him a share of that food until that Brahmana had eaten his fill. And after he had eaten his fill, then he sat down to eat. And then he first divided enough for his family. And after feeding his family, he was about to sit down to eat, when again at the door there appeared a Chandal. And this Chandal said, I am very hungry, do you have any food for me? So Rantidev said, come in, have some food. And he gives him the food that was kept aside for him. And after the Chandal eats the food, he is again about to eat, when a man comes with dogs at the door. He is a master of dogs, and he says that, do you have any food for me? So after giving him the food, there is nothing left. So he says, can I have some water for my dog? So finally Rantidev, who has starved without food and water for so many days, even gives away that water. So after he and his dogs have eaten and drunk and gone away, Rantidev, who is now on the point of death because of starvation, is about to leave his body. But when he is about to leave his body, what happens? Immediately in front of him appear all the demigods. And the demigods all say that actually we have come in the form of the Brahmana, the Chandal, the master of the dogs and the dogs, for the specific purpose of testing your piety. And now that we have discovered the pious and wonderful person you are, we can give you any boon that you want. What boon would you like to have? So what does Rantidev say? Rantidev says, I want no boon. The only thing that I want is that I should always remember God. That is the only boon that he asks for. So in fact, Rantidev is held up as a symbol of everybody, the person whom everybody should try to emulate, that we should always think that before ourselves we should think of somebody else who is hungry, and we should share food which has been blessed by God, which is actually a sacrament. We should share that food with as many people as possible, because not only do we satisfy their body but also their mind and their soul. But sometimes you might wonder that, if I start doing that, there will be no end to it. Because after all, you can't satisfy everybody. And then finally, I am not Rantidev. What will happen to me? I will fast to death. But the actual secret about prasad is that no matter how much prasad you give out, there is always enough left over for you. And no matter how little prasad there is to be shared among people, people are always satisfied with what they get. Because you have satisfied God. It has been said, Yatha taror mula nishyanena triptayanti skando bhujo pashaka pranaropach yathendriyam tathaiva tathaiva sarva aranam achutejya. That just like when you water the root of a plant, the leaves, the flowers and the branches become satisfied. Just like when you eat food, what happens is that the stomach is filled but automatically the limbs get nourishment. So also when you satisfy God, everybody automatically gets satisfied. This example is given in the Mahabharata. You must have all seen that story on the screen. That to trouble the Pandavas who are living in the forest, Duryodhana requests Durvas Muni to go to the Pandavas' house to have food. He tells Durvas Muni to go to the house of the Pandavas to have prasad. And he sends him at a time when the Pandavas will probably have finished their lunch. Now, Durvas Muni goes to the Pandavas' house accompanied by several thousand disciples. Of course, in our TV show, they showed him going with 5 people. But that's because they must have been short of extras on that day. In actual fact, when he goes to the house of the Pandavas, he goes with several thousand people. And when he lands up at the doorstep of the Pandavas' hut, Yudhishthir is absolutely struck by horror. He says, we've got enough problems on our heads, and now Durvas Muni, a saintly person, has come with several thousand of his disciples, and if we don't offer him food, he will curse us, because that's the kind of nature that Durvas Muni has, and if he curses us, we'll have even more problems. So to save some time, to gain some time to think what he should do, he tells Durvas Muni that certainly we will feed you as much food as you want. Please, you must go to the river, have a bath, purify yourself, do your prayers, and you come back. So that's what Durvas Muni does. With several thousand disciples, he enters into the river and he performs his daily bath and his prayers and all that are done before sitting for his lunch. And then Yudhishthir goes and tells Draupadi that Draupadi, Durvas Muni has come with several thousand of his disciples, please make lunch for them. This might sound familiar to some wives over here. So when Draupadi hears this, she gets absolutely horror struck. Actually, Draupadi has been given what is called an Akshay Patra. That Akshay Patra means that as many people as you want can eat from that plate. But once Draupadi has eaten from that plate, then nobody can eat from that plate, because then it does not produce any more food until the next meal. So she realizes that now everybody has eaten, I have also eaten, so that Akshay Patra will not produce any more food. So how am I going to feed Durvas Muni and the 1,000 disciples? But Draupadi has one thing in her favor. She knows how to turn to God. And we should learn from her as far as that is concerned. When we are in distress, we should learn to turn to God. And that's what she does. She prays to God with great intensity. Oh Krishna, you please save me somehow or the other. And Krishna appears. So she tells Krishna that this is the mess that I'm in. Durvas Muni has come with several thousand disciples. How can I feed them? There's nothing more that I have to give them. So Krishna says, don't worry about them, you feed me. So Draupadi becomes absolutely heartbroken. She says, it is true that I feel heartbroken because I can't feed you. At least Durvas Muni, I'm afraid, that's why I want to feed them. But you are my Lord, I want to feed you with love and devotion, but I have nothing to give you. So I am doubly miserable now. Miserable because I can't feed Durvas Muni, miserable because I cannot feed you. So Lord Krishna says, doesn't matter. You just bring your plate, there must be 1 grain of rice stuck on that. Give me that 1 grain of rice that is stuck on the plate. So Draupadi gives him that single grain of rice that is stuck on the plate. And when Lord Krishna eats that 1 grain of rice, he says, now don't worry. Because what happens? Krishna is satisfied by the love and devotion that she has. And therefore he partakes of that grain of rice. But the minute he eats that grain of rice, what happens to Durvas Muni and all his disciples? In the river, suddenly their abdomens start bulging. They feel full. They start belching. And they feel that they cannot eat a single morsel more. And they become tremendously embarrassed. That here Yudhishthir must be making such wonderful food for us. And now we are feeling so full that we cannot eat even a morsel. We'll make fools of ourselves. We'll be embarrassed by going there. Better we don't go to their house. So Durvas Muni and all his disciples, now feeling completely full, they walk out of the river and they quietly sneak away and go back from where they came. So that is the miracle of prasad, that when you feed God, what happens? Automatically everybody gets satisfied. He ate 1 grain of rice, but Durvas Muni and all his disciples, they immediately felt full, no problem. So this is the miracle of prasad. When God eats, automatically everyone gets satisfied. And I can tell you this because I've had personal experience. I'm not just relating stories to you. This is all personal experience. In fact, Couple of years ago, when Radhanath Swami had come to my house, one of the Swamis in our movement had come to my house, I was to bring him to my house for prasadam along with 2 other devotees. I told my wife that in the morning I am bringing 3 people for prasadam to my house. So my wife said, fine, I'll prepare prasad for 3 people. But before that, I took him for a lecture in the college. And after the lecture that was conducted over there, so many people became interested in talking further about the philosophy that by the time we left the college, there were 3 car loads of people along with us. So instead of the 3 people that I had promised that I'd bring for lunch, 3 car loads. That means there must have been approximately at least 6 people in each car. So about 18 or 20 people landed up there. So the first car came with us and my wife was standing in the balcony with a nice smile on her face to greet us. And we came out of the car and I smiled at her and said, yes, we're coming up. But then she saw there were not only 3 people in the car, there were 6 people in the car. So her smile became a little smaller. And shortly, what happened? 2 more cars landed up. And when 2 more cars landed up and people started piling out of those cars, the corners of her mouth which were turned up now turned down. So I knew that I was in for a hard time. So I went up and I told my wife, don't worry. Don't worry if you made food only for 3 people. Don't worry if you made prasad only for 3 people. Remember the story of Draupadi and Akshay Patra. So my wife said, please save your lectures for other people. Don't try to give me these lectures. Because here we are talking about something which is practical. I have cooked prasad only for 3 people and you brought 18 people. And now you want to give me lectures on top of it. So I said, don't worry. What we shall do is that we shall let everybody eat, and if there's anything remaining, we shall have. Now I'd like to tell you what happened. What happened was everybody ate, and only after that both of us sat down to eat. But still there was so much prasad left over that for 3 days after that we were eating the remnants of that meal. So don't ask me. And it was delicious prasad. Everybody enjoyed it. So you don't ask me what happened. I don't know what happened. But all I know is that prasad was cooked for 3 people, 18 people ate, and we continued to eat that for 2 days after that. This is the miracle of prasad. This is the actual fact. And I am talking from experience. I am not giving you stories from here and there. This is actual realization. But in actual fact, when we talk about prasadam and we talk about enjoyment and we talk about relishing prasad, we should never lose sight of the fact that the actual reason why we eat prasad is for the purpose of simply controlling the tongue. We eat prasadam for the sake of controlling the tongue. Actually, before we eat prasadam, we have a small prayer. And what do we pray? We say that, my dear Lord, O Krishna, this body is a network of ignorance. This body that we are inhabiting is a network of ignorance. And our senses, they are our most deadly enemies, which drag us unto our death. Of all the senses, the most difficult sense to control is the tongue. And today, I am offering you this prasad so that by my eating this prasad, I will be able to gradually control the tongue. That is what we pray. We pray that by eating prasad, we may control the tongue. So the purpose of eating prasad is to control the tongue. That is a very, very important principle. Because the tongue is the last organ in the body to be controlled. In fact, the example is given of the fish in the Bhagavatam. The fish is actually trapped and dragged to death because of its tongue. It sees something delicious hanging on a hook and it goes and it bites that hook. And thereby it is pulled out of water and it is dragged to its death. So also, the human being, because he is unable to control his tongue, he is dragged from the spiritual world, or he is dragged from the spiritual path, and he is dragged onto the material path, and thereby he re-enters the cycle of birth and death, and once again he perishes. Therefore, one who controls the tongue is actually one who has progressed in spiritual life. In fact, it has also been said that one who has not controlled the tongue, he has not controlled any of his senses. But one who has controlled his tongue, he has understood that he must have controlled the other senses. because of all the senses, that is sight, hearing, smell, touch, genitals, and also the tongue, the taste. It is the tongue which comes under control last. It is the last sense to be controlled. In fact, it has been said in the Vedic scriptures that the tongue, the belly, and the genitals, they all come in one straight line. And if you lose control over the tongue, you lose control over the belly, you lose control over the genitalia. Because it works like this. You lose control over the tongue, what happens? You eat too much. When you eat too much, your belly distends. When your belly distends, what happens? You get visceral congestion. The blood vessels in your abdomen, they distend with blood because you have filled the abdomen with as much food as possible. When you get visceral congestion, what happens? The pelvis also gets congested. And when the pelvis also gets congested, the genitalia also get congested. Therefore, you lose control of your genitals as well. Therefore, one who controls the tongue, he automatically controls the belly, he automatically controls the genitals. But one who does not control the tongue, he has controlled nothing. This is a very important principle in spiritual life. That one can simply control all the senses, simply if you control the tongue. If you manage to control the tongue, you control all the possible senses. If you cannot control the tongue, you have controlled nothing. This is a very important principle in spiritual life. And we eat prasad for what purpose? We eat prasad for the sake of purifying ourselves, for the sake of controlling the tongue. That is why we eat prasad. And the best example of one who has controlled the tongue is given an example of Raghunath Das Goswami. Now, Raghunath Das Goswami is a wonderful example of one who has controlled the tongue. Because Raghunath Das Goswami was in actual fact the son of a very rich landowner, a great zamindar. And he owned most of the land, most of the best land in the whole of Bengal, that included the present Bangladesh. And he was so rich that he used to maintain practically all the Vaishnavas and Brahmins in the whole of Bengal. So rich was his father and uncle. And Raghunath Das, he actually left his home, he left his family, and he became a renunciate, he became a monk. So when his father heard that this man had become a monk, he had become a sannyasi, he thought that to make my son's life more comfortable, I should send some money. So he used to send a lot of money to his son. And his son, what he would do was that with that money, he would cook wonderful prasad and he would call all the monks and sannyasis and share it with them. Along with them, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of course, whom he had taken shelter of, was also there. So one day after several months, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that why is it that Raghunath Das Goswami has not called me to enjoy prasad? So he said that Raghunath Das Goswami has now stopped accepting money from his family. He has decided to live simply by begging for food. So he used to stand at the Simhadwar at Jagannath Puri. And there he would stand and he would accept whatever prasadam was given to him by devotees. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very happy. But after some time, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that now he doesn't even stand at the Simhadwar. He doesn't even stand there asking for prasad. What is the reason? So he says that he has given up standing and begging for prasad because he develops the mentality of a prostitute. He starts thinking, oh, this man gave prasad to me 3 days ago, he might give it again. This fellow looks like a likely candidate who will give me prasad. So in this way he is developing the mentality of a prostitute, therefore he doesn't want to ask anybody for food. He is standing in line at a free food booth, an annakshetra, that although the food is of poor quality, he is standing there in line and accepting whatever food is given to him. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, wonderful, he has progressed in controlling his tongue. This is what I appreciate, he has progressed in spiritual life. Finally he said, I don't even see him standing there at the annakshetra, what is the reason? So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually went personally to see how Raghunath Das Goswami used to eat prasad. And this is what he discovered. That Raghunath Das Goswami was actually eating a unique type of prasad. In Jagannath Puri, what happens is that the prasad is sold in the shops. And the shopkeepers, they sell that prasad, and after 3 days when that prasad becomes stale and nobody eats that prasad, they take that prasad and they give it to the cows. So Raghunath Das Goswami used to wait until the shopkeepers had finished selling their goods, and the stale prasad after 3 days they would give to the cows. He would wait. He would see the cows eat. And finally, what the cows also would not eat, he would go and he would take it from the ground. He would take it, he would wash it with a lot of water, he would mix it with salt, and then he would eat it. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he saw him eating this type of prasad, and he went to him and he snatched that prasadam from him and tasted it, and he said, "This is the most ecstatic, most wonderful prasad I have tasted in my whole life." He showed that he was most pleased with the austerity that finally Raghunath Das Goswami had achieved, because by eating wonderful prasad, he had gradually graduated to simpler and simpler and simpler and simpler prasad, until finally he had come to the most austere form of prasad. So we should remember that yes, today we may be eating wonderful prasad, no doubt, but we are eating prasad to control the tongue, so that gradually by progression we should also progress. Maybe we may not land up like Raghunath Das Goswami. We don't have to stand and wait for the cows to finish eating. But we should understand that we should eventually simplify the prasad that we eat, until what we eat is finally a very simple prasad, only meant for keeping our body and soul together. So this is what I mean, purification through enjoyment. You enjoy yourself with wonderful prasad, but you get purified, and when you get purified, then you no longer desire that enjoyment. That in the beginning you eat wonderful things and you enjoy yourself, but in that enjoyment you are getting purified. So the next time you don't relish, or you don't really desire that level of enjoyment. You become more and more austere through enjoyment. This is the wonderful process of Krishna consciousness. That you enjoy, but through enjoyment you get purified. Through enjoyment you become austere. This is the uniqueness of the process. That we eat prasad for the sake of controlling the tongue. This is the most important principle. So, now I have told you something about prasad. And I hope that at least from today onwards, that is 26th Sunday, November, 7 o'clock, do not eat anything unless it is vegetarian food that has been offered with love and devotion to God. By whom? By you. You should offer it. Even if somebody has already offered it, for the sake of your consciousness, you should remember God before you eat it. And in this way you will become purified. It has been said, Ahara Shuddhao Sattva Shuddhi. Sattva Shuddhi Dhruva Smriti. Smriti Lambe Vipramoksha. That when you eat pure food, what happens? You actually acquire purity, because the texture of your mind actually becomes pure. When the texture of your mind becomes pure, you can remember God. When you remember God, what happens? Then you are actually able to attain the goal of life. You are able to attain bhakti. You will attain moksha and bhakti both. That is the purpose of eating. So don't misunderstand this lecture. This lecture is not about becoming a vegetarian. Sometimes people come to me very proudly and say, "Aha, I am a vegetarian." So what if you are a vegetarian, my friend? Even monkeys and donkeys are vegetarians. Becoming a vegetarian is not a great qualification. I am not trying to make you into a vegetarian. What I am trying to do is, I am simply trying to help you to understand that food itself is an instrument which you can use to develop love of God. I don't want you to become a vegetarian. I want you to become a devotee of Krishna. I want you to become a devotee of God according to whatever faith you profess. So what I want you to do is that before you eat your food, offer it with love and devotion to God, and then eat it. And then you will understand what is prasad. And actually, please understand that even then, don't think prasad is everything. Of course, in the beginning you might think like that. In fact, in the beginning, many neophytes think that eating prasadam is the goal of life. Eating prasadam is not the goal of life. Eating prasadam is simply an instrument towards developing the goal of life. That is, developing love of God, of developing bhakti. And a most wonderful instrument indeed. So I hope that you will all take my lecture seriously and become prasadam addicts from today. Thank you. So now we'll have a slideshow on You Are What You Eat. Always three types of people in the world. Who are the three types of people? One is those who are hardcore non-vegetarians. These are hardcore non-vegetarians. They cannot imagine a life without meat. They must have meat at every meal, and they cannot eat if there is no meat on the table. On the other hand, you have people who are hardcore vegetarians. They love animals, don't eat them. They don't eat anything but vegetarian food. They're absolutely obsessed that they should not eat animal products. But sometimes, in fact most of us are like this guy in the middle. They're not quite sure what they should do. Well, most Indians are like that. Sometimes they eat vegetarian food and they think that, aha, this is my normal diet. But when they see this guy eating his stuff, they say, why not have some of that also? Why not taste it? It seems wonderful. So occasionally they eat meat and sometimes they eat vegetarian food. And actually they're confused as to what should be done. Should they eat meat or should they eat vegetarian food? Or should they eat both? In actual fact, in the Western world we find that more and more people are switching over to a vegetarian diet. That in the Western world, people have now realized how horrible meat eating is, that the amount of diseases that it causes the body, and therefore people are more and more learning and beginning to relish the wonderful vegetarian cuisine. And they have actually begun to realize that vegetarian food can be certainly as tasty, and it can have a wonderful texture, a wonderful taste, a wonderful flavor and fragrance that matches and even surpasses that of a meat diet. They learn that actually vegetarian food can be as wonderful and as tasty as that of a non-vegetarian diet. Now as a doctor I must tell you, I recommend the vegetarian plate. This is what any doctor would do. If a sensible doctor would do. For example, here you have a doctor who's taking the order in a restaurant. So if a doctor was to be the waiter in a restaurant, he would say, I recommend the vegetarian plate. Now why would a doctor recommend the vegetarian plate? Because although meat may appear wonderful, although it may taste delicious, in actual fact, what you're eating is sheer poison for your system. What you're eating is sheer poison for your system. You may think that's wonderful meat, but although that's a wonderful slice of meat, the actual fact is that by eating this meat, you are sowing the seeds for your own destruction. This is a map of the world which I said I'll show you. It shows these countries that are shaded in red, where the incidence of large bowel cancer is the highest. And you have the other intermediate areas shaded where the incidence of bowel cancer is also very high. These are the countries where meat is eaten as red meat in the largest amount. So these are the countries where they eat the maximum amount of red meat, and these are also the countries where there is the largest amount of large bowel cancer, because there is a direct link between meat eating and large bowel cancer. So in fact your body has not been designed for eating meat. God has not given you a body for eating meat. Here you have the example of a meat eater, a vegetarian animal, a herbivore, and man. You will see there are so many comparisons which show that man is more like a herbivore rather than a meat eater. Meat eater has claws, but man and vegetarian animals do not have. Meat eaters have no skin pores, they perspire through the tongue. But the human being and the herbivore, they perspire through skin pores. So also the teeth of the meat eater are different from the teeth of the vegetarian animal. This is the point I told you. That the intestinal tract is 3 times the body length in a meat eater, so that rapidly decaying meat can pass out quickly. Whereas in a vegetarian animal and in man, who is also a vegetarian animal, the intestinal tract, it's 12 times the body length. It is 12 times the body length. Therefore, when you eat meat, the putrefactive products of meat remain in your body so long that they cause toxic effects. The hydrochloric acid in the stomach is very strong. It can digest meat. But in the herbivore and in man, who is also a vegetarian animal, the stomach acid is 20 times less strong. Therefore, meat cannot be digested as easily by a vegetarian animal and by man who is a vegetarian animal. So God has given you a body for the purpose of eating a vegetarian diet. This is what I want to make very clear. And these are some of the health hazards of a meat diet that is low in dietary fiber. That is meat diet with refined foodstuffs. In the gastrointestinal tract, you have cancer, along with so many diseases starting from appendicitis and going on to hiatus hernia. In the cardiovascular system, you have coronary artery disease and so many other diseases. Gallstones, dental caries, rheumatoid arthritis. All these diseases are caused by a meat diet that is low in natural vegetable fiber. These are some important practical points on meat eating, which I would like you to know, that you take in so many preservatives along with your meat because animals contain so many diseases, therefore they are given hormones and antibiotics and tranquilizers and 2,700 other drugs. It's also that 90 to 97%, I must have told you 80%, but I am sorry, I can be accused now of actually being more conservative in my estimate. According to the Diet and Stress and Vascular Disease in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 1961, long time ago, they have stated 90 to 97% of heart disease, the cause of more than one half of the deaths in the United States, could be prevented by a vegetarian diet. I told you 80%, but it's 90 to 97% of heart disease, which is the cause of more than one half of the deaths in the United States, can be prevented by vegetarian diet. In the Journal of the American Medical Association in 1972, they have declared in Diet and Coronary Heart Disease that further evidence of the unsuitability of the human intestinal tract for digestion of flesh is the relationship established by numerous studies between colon cancer and meat eating. And here in Brussels University, they have established that vegetarians are able to perform physical tests 2 to 3 times longer than meat eaters before exhaustion. And they also recover from their exhaustion in 1/5 the time needed by meat eaters. Therefore, you can actually have greater endurance if you eat vegetarian diet. Your stamina will increase if you eat a vegetarian diet. So also, in the causes of cancer, in that book it has been mentioned that out of 25 nations eating flesh, 19 had a high cancer rate. Whereas in 35 nations eating little or no flesh, none had a high rate of cancer. But still, despite all these hard facts, people cannot resist eating meat, especially the fast foods, McDonald's, Burger King, Kentucky Fried. And it may appear that you're eating something very delicious when you have your hot dog or when you have your hamburger. But actually, what does your hot dog and hamburger contain? It contains all those portions of meat which in actual fact have been rejected by everybody else. Everybody else has rejected these portions of meat because nobody will eat them. They come from the leg, they come from all the rejected parts of the animal. And yet, you bite into that hamburger, you bite into that sausage, you bite into your hot dog with great relish, thinking you're eating wonderful food stuff. In actual fact, you're eating the most rejected portions of meat. As I said, you might think that, I don't eat meat, I'm a fish eater. So what if you're a fish eater? You're in bad trouble already. Because fish eating has been directly linked with stomach cancer. In the Scandinavian countries, it has also been linked with stomach cancer in Japan. Japan has the highest incidence of stomach cancer. It has also got the highest incidence of fish eaters. Furthermore, what do you think the fish eats? Actually, it is said that fish eating is perhaps the lowest form of food. Why? Because all our pollutants, all our refuse is dumped in the sea. If you don't believe me, you travel to Worli, Love Grove pumping station. And you will see that all the stool that Bombay passes, where does all that stool and urine go? All that stool and urine which you have been passing for so many years is pumped into the sea. And who eats that? This fish. And who eats that fish? Maybe you. So what happens? Your stool and urine is dumped in the sea, that stool and urine is eaten by the fish, and who eats that fish? The same person whose stool and urine is eaten by the fish. So it forms a cycle. So you feed the fish filth and then you eat that fish. So this is the nature of the fish. Therefore, fish eating is also condemned. It's one of the lowest forms of food as mentioned in the Vedic scriptures. It's even lower than eating meat. And this is that wonderful egg. You think that egg eating is not bad at all. But actually in a fertilized egg you can actually see the fetus. You can actually see the formed fetus. And if it's a vegetarian egg, what are you eating? You are eating the menstruation of the chicken. Would you like to have a menstrual omelette? That's what you are having next time you have your egg. It's a very dirty flesh food. Also, I must tell you that eating eggs is perhaps the most damaging to your heart because eggs contain the maximum amount of cholesterol. If you eat 2 eggs, that's your quota for the week. Because if you've eaten those 2 eggs in the week, you've consumed all the cholesterol which is considered to be safe. And every time they discover that the cholesterol that they have sanctioned is actually too much. So this is very high cholesterol stuff. It is very bad for your health. Therefore, you get a diseased society. A society that's full of disease. Not only that, it's economically unfeasible that everyone should become meat eater. Therefore, you have in countries where there's a bumper crop of corn, like for example in Illinois, you also have neighboring them people who are actually on the border of starvation. Why? Because where does all that grain go? That grain goes to feed animals who are being raised for slaughter. It takes 16 pounds of grain to produce 1 pound of meat. 16 pounds of grain are required to produce 1 pound of meat. In actual fact, if all the grain that is fed to animals in the United States of America was saved, the rest of the world need not produce any food. That means the United States of America, if they stopped feeding animals who are being raised for slaughter, without anybody growing grain anywhere else in the world, we would still have enough to eat. That means one nation could produce enough grain for the whole world if they stopped feeding animals whom they are raising for slaughter. So it's economically also not a viable proposition. And what happens? When you have meat, meat is the example of a lifestyle that doesn't care for restriction, which doesn't care for austerity. In fact, it has been shown that alcoholism is far more common in meat eaters than in non-meat eaters. Non-meat eaters have a very low level of alcoholism because they lead a controlled lifestyle, whereas alcoholics are found mainly in the meat-eating population. Because these are all symbols or examples or symptoms of an uncontrolled mind, which eventually leads to disturbance and to your own destruction. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it has been clearly stated that the bull is the emblem of the moral principle and the cow is the representative of the earth. When the bull and cow are in a joyful mood, the people of the world are also in a joyful mood, because the bull, he produces grains and the cow delivers milk. So, it's only in places where the cow is valued, where the cow is protected, there can be health and there can be happiness. Because the cow is actually the symbol of religion. The bull is the father because he helps to carry people, he helps to carry loads, he also helps to produce grain in the field by pulling the plow, therefore he is the father. And the cow is the mother because the mother gives us milk and the cow gives us milk. And this milk is a wonder food. Why is it a wonder food? Because from that milk alone you can get so many things. You can get ghee, you can get cream, you can get butter, you can get curd, you can get buttermilk, you can get a whole lot of wonderful things just from milk. It's a miracle food. It contains all the things that you could possibly need in a normal diet. And of course the cow is very dear to Krishna because Krishna is the original cowherd boy. He's the original cowboy. He's not the cowboy that you see on the American screen. What are those cowboys? They carry guns and they raise cows for slaughter. But Krishna is the original cowboy. He doesn't carry a gun and he doesn't raise cows for slaughter. He looks after and he protects the cow. Therefore, he's the original cowboy. And all religions also recommend vegetarianism. You have actually in the Bible, this is from in the Old Testament. Here it has been said that you who have compassion for a lamb shall be the shepherd of my people Israel. In fact, it is also stated in the Bible that he is sick of the sacrifices of beasts. He is sick of the blood of beasts that have been shed in sacrifice to him. In fact, he says that he rejects all the fat of all the animals that have been given to him. And those who eat it shall also be kept apart from his people. So it is actually rejected by all religions. Adam and Eve, when they lived in paradise, it was a wonderful vegetarian kingdom. It's only after their fall, and even after their fall they were vegetarians. Only after Noah's Ark, when there was not enough vegetation on the earth because of the flood, that they received sanction to eat meat. That only in extraordinary circumstances in the Bible has it been mentioned that there is sanction for meat eating. So throughout the scripture it has been mentioned, all scriptures of the world, that one should be eating vegetarian food. Even in early Christianity, in fact, it has been said that Jesus Christ was actually an Essene. What's an Essene? The Essenes were a group of people who actually were vegetarians. And Jesus of Nazareth was an Essene. He was a pure vegetarian. And the early Christians were all vegetarians. And in the Essene Gospel of Peace it has been stated, "And the flesh of slain beasts in his body will become his own tomb. For I tell you truly, he who kills himself, and whoso eats the flesh of slain beasts eats the body of death." And actually, Jesus was one who taught, "Thou shalt not kill." Sometimes people say, "Thou shalt not kill" means not kill human beings. Then actually Jesus should have said, "Thou shalt not murder." Why did he say, "Thou shalt not kill"? He says, "Thou shalt not kill" because he wanted men to have compassion on animals. Because he himself, as an Essene, he was a pure vegetarian. And of course, sometimes people say that, no, Jesus, he ate fish. What about the miracle of the loaves and the fish? But in actual fact, if you read the Bible in the original Greek, actually the Bible has been translated from original Greek. And in the original Greek, it doesn't read bread and fish, it reads bread and fruit. It's in the translation from Greek into English that some interested parties have converted fruit into fish. So also if you read the Bible, you will find in so many places that in the original Greek, where they are talking about food or trophos, it has been translated by the translators to read meat. So although Christ was a vegetarian, interested parties have made Christ into a non-vegetarian to satisfy themselves. In actual fact, this particularly took place at the great conference at Constantinople, where Emperor Constantine wanted to make Christianity the state religion. But Constantine objected to the restrictions on meat and strong drink that were found in the Bible. Therefore, to make Christianity a state religion, the unfortunate people at that time, they converted and changed what the Bible said about restrictions about meat and drink so that they could make it an accepted state religion. But in actual fact, if you go back to the original Bible in Greek, if you go back to early Christianity, you will find that there is a recommendation for eating a vegetarian diet, and also a recommendation against the eating and consumption of intoxicants. For example, Christ has said, "Be ye not drunk with wine, but be filled with spirit." So he has rejected intoxication along with meat eating. And we have so many saintly persons who are following the path of Christ. Like for example, here we have Saint Francis of Assisi. So this great saint and people who follow in the footsteps of this saint have achieved love of God simply by following the path led by Christ, the original path, the undistorted path, the path where they abstain from flesh foods, where they abstain from intoxicants. It is only later people, theologians like for example Thomas Aquinas, who actually brought about a change in the philosophy of the church. So in fact Thomas Aquinas said that, well, if you say that you cannot eat an animal because it has life, then you cannot eat vegetables also. This is the same philosophy that he was propounding. He did not understand the principle of committing minimum violence. In fact, Thomas Aquinas went so far as to say that not only do animals not have a soul, but he said even women do not have a soul. This is the philosophy that Aquinas actually propounded, which has become the philosophy of the Christian church. This is not the philosophy of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ never taught any of these things. He Islam also we have Prophet Muhammad who says, whoever is kind to the creatures of God is kind to himself. And actually, Muhammad was speaking to people who were actually at that period in history very degraded. Therefore, he had to make some allowance for them. And the rites and the rituals that he taught for the sacrifice of animals was not to encourage vegetarians to become non-vegetarians. It was actually to make the non-vegetarians slaughter fewer animals. Because in one of the writings of a famous Sufi saint, it has been stated that Muhammad taught how to slaughter an animal very slowly by slitting the jugular vein, by looking in the eyes with love and compassion, and by chanting the kalima, only by a person who prays 5 times a day, so that the number of animals that were being slaughtered on a large scale should be minimized. So actually, to do away with slaughterhouses, to minimize the amount of slaughter, Muhammad recommended certain prescribed rituals. But Muhammad himself, he loved to eat vegetarian food. He loved to eat dates, he loved to have milk, he loved curds. And he always loved and imagined and wanted a green land where his people could actually live. That's why Islam actually has green as their favorite color, because he wanted a land full of vegetation where people could happily eat a vegetarian diet. Muhammad was a most compassionate person. In fact, it has been said that when a cat once came and slept on the robe of Muhammad, he asked that the robe should be cut, that the cloth should be cut rather than disturb the sleeping cat. So compassionate was Muhammad. Can you imagine Muhammad actually sanctioning meat eating on a large scale? It was actually a means to reduce the meat eating in a population that was addicted to it. Therefore, actually, when people go on pilgrimage to Mecca, they're actually supposed to abstain from violence and products of violence. This is the instruction of Muhammad. And there are many people who are followers of Muhammad who are also vegetarians. All Sufi saints are vegetarians because they have understood the highest truth. And you have Kabir Panthis who say that if sacrifice of animal leads to heaven, why offer prayer and observe fast? Better slaughter your family. Because the Quran, it says, it has been said that be kind to all creatures, because God is the symbol of compassion. This has been said in the Quran. So in fact, it has also been said, why slaughter innocent animals for your pleasure? Just for pleasuring your tongue, just for gratifying your senses, you are becoming party in the slaughter of innocent animals. In Buddhism also it has been said that eating of meat extinguishes the seed of great compassion. Buddha incarnated for the specific purpose of stopping meat eating. However, people today have forgotten his mission. And therefore you find Buddhists who eat meat, including many of great Buddhist, so-called heads of Buddhist monasteries. They eat meat. They don't understand that the original message of Buddha was that you should not eat meat. He incarnated for taking people away from the path of slaughter, as mentioned in some of the big scriptures. In fact, their philosophy is that it doesn't matter if you eat meat, provided you haven't slaughtered the animal. So if somebody else gives you meat to eat, fine, you eat it. But that is not the right philosophy. Because in actual fact, how can you be divorcing yourself from that violence? Because that piece of meat has come by the slaughter of an innocent animal, and although it's followed a long chain, eventually it has come to you, so you have become party in that violence. In the Mahabharata, it has been said that one who sells the animal, one who kills the animal, one who cuts the animal, one who cooks the animal, is equally guilty along with the person who eats the animal, and all of them have to share the karma. So here you have them people sitting at judgment. This is the judge wrapping his gavel. And these are all the people in that chain. All of them are equally guilty. All of them are participants in that karma. So whether you slaughter an animal in a crude way, like these tribesmen in Africa are doing here, or whether you do it in a posh factory like this, it's a slaughterhouse. The result is the same. You may do it with great sophistication, but the result is the same. And by the law of karma, you must suffer for the suffering you have caused. You can see here the cow has acquired a human face, the human has acquired a bovine face already, because in the next life they shall exchange places. So also, if you are responsible for keeping animals in captivity, like in these cages here, you will also be taken into captivity. If you truss and bind animals for slaughter like here, you will also be trussed and bound for slaughter. If you hunt and shoot animals and you dump them in your pickup truck, a day will come and you will also be hunted and shot, and you will also be dumped in a truck in turn. Because in fact, where there is meat eating, there must be war. And the cause of war is meat eating. This is called mass karma. When nations are addicted to meat eating, those nations must suffer war at some time or the other. Therefore, where meat eating occurs in a large scale in the population, war must occur. And the United Nations may make many resolutions, but unless the United Nations makes a resolution to stop meat eating in the world, there will always be war. And where there is meat eating, there will be other forms of violence. You may campaign, protect unborn children, stop abortion. But behind you there is a sign, McDonald's hamburgers, over 35 million served, 35 billion served. So you are slaughtering animals. How can you prevent slaughtering your own kind? It's a matter of time. If you are slaughtering animals for meat, in time to come you will be slaughtering your own children. This is the natural progression. So if you eat like an animal, what do you expect? In time to come, you shall also become an animal. Because just like you have moved up through all the million species of life to human form, you will also move downwards and you shall attain a human form. If you eat like a pig, you shall become a pig. But before that, you shall have to go to one of the different worlds, because the Vedic scriptures postulate different dimensions of reality just like scientists. And these different dimensions of reality are seen in hell, where those who eat meat must be punished in hell, and they must suffer like the animals they have caused suffering to. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that there are different types of foodstuffs. Sattvic food, which gives you strength, health, happiness and satisfaction. These foods are sweet, juicy, fattening and palatable. Rajasic food, which is too sour, too salty, too pungent, too dry and too hot. This is liked by people in Rajasic mode. They cause pain, distress and disease. And then you have Tamasic food, which is tasteless and stale, putrid and decomposed and unclean. It is liked by people in the mode of ignorance. So you have three types of foodstuffs and three types of people. You have the pious person who eats foods in the mode of goodness. You have the passionate person who eats foods in the modes of passion. And you have the person in the mode of ignorance who is constantly lost, not only to spiritual reality but also to normal mundane reality. So these are examples of sattvic foods: vegetables, grain and milk. These are sattvic foods. But when we talk about food, there are many types of food. You have health food, you have soul food, you have junk food and you have food. So what food are we talking about? What food are we recommending? We are not simply recommending food in the mode of goodness. We are recommending food for the spirit. That is what we are looking for. We are looking for food for the spirit. In the Bhagavad Gita says that you cannot even obtain food for your body if you do not worship God. Annad bhavanti bhutani parjanyo anna sambhava yagnad bhavati parjanyo yagna karma samudbhava. That all living beings, they live on grains, grains are produced from rain, and rains are produced by performance of sacrifice, and sacrifice is born of prescribed duties. Therefore it has been said that it's not only you should work as you're obligated, but you should also worship the controllers. Because by worshipping the controllers, by performing sacrifice, rain will come down and thereby you will be able to get food grain. And those places in the world where one has forgotten about God, where one has actually not performed sacrifice, these are places which are at risk from desertification. This is a map of the world which shows areas of desert and areas where desertification is taking place. These are places in the world where there is actual lack of God consciousness. And therefore in time to come they shall become deserts, because there is no rainfall, because they do not perform sacrifice to God. And soon there shall be no grass. and the cow, the symbol of religion, shall not exist anymore. This is an example of Ethiopia, with starving children, a land which is actually suffering drought. And this is the result of forgetting God. Sometimes you might say that, oh, I offer food in sacrifice, but I am offering meat to Kali. I am offering food to Durga, I am eating Durga Prasad. I am eating Durga Prasad. Sometimes you have meat shops in Calcutta which say Durga Prasad is available here. But try to understand that this instruction in the Vedic scripture is meant to prevent you from eating meat. That if you want to eat Durga Prasad, you have to take a goat on Amavasya day, and you have to cut the throat of the goat yourself on Amavasya day, that when there is no moon, and you have to whisper in the ear of the goat that, my dear goat, I am sacrificing you in this life, in the next life you can sacrifice meat to Durga or to Kali. So that after doing this a couple of times, you will become wise and you will say, no, I should not do this anymore because I am squandering my future lifetimes as a goat. And even this prasad is not eaten by Durga. Why is it not eaten by Durga? It's not Durga prasad. Because Durga simply does not eat everything that you offer her. Durga is actually a pious lady. She's the wife of Shiva. And Shiva is the greatest devotee of Lord Krishna. So being the greatest devotee of Lord Krishna, he is a Param Vaishnava. Therefore he eats only vegetarian food. Shiva eats only vegetarian food. And Parvati, because she is a true wife, what does she do? Because she is a great example of what wives should be, she actually eats only the remnants of her husband. Actually in Vedic scripture it has been enjoined that the wife should fast until the husband comes home. Then she should first of all offer prasad to her husband. After her husband has eaten his fill, then only the wife should eat the remnants of the food from her husband's plate. That is known as somebody who is pativrata, one who has taken the vow of serving her husband. Because that is the example of how Indian women are supposed to behave. Because their husband is not an ordinary person, he is supposed to be their guru. He is known as Pati Guru. So the husband is the first guru. And his responsibility is to save his wife from the cycle of birth and death. And therefore the wife only eats what the husband has eaten before her. Of course, today the situation is different. When the husband comes home, the wife is probably sleeping or watching TV and she says, the food is there on the table. You heat it up and eat it if you want. But actually Parvati is not like that, Kali is not like that, Durga is not like that. They only eat what has been eaten by the husband. Therefore, what does Kali do? She only eats vegetarian food. So who eats that food which you are sacrificing to Kali? The companions of Kali. Who are the companions of Kali? You see in the background? Kali is always accompanied by bhutas and pretas. All the ghosts and the ghouls and the demons, they accompany Kali. So what you imagine to be Kali Prasad, that is eaten by the ghouls and the demons. So you are eating the prasad of demons. No wonder you become demonical when you eat that prasad. How can you worship anybody, whether it's Durga or Kali, and ask for mercy when you yourself, the next moment, you go and show lack of mercy to other living entities? It doesn't make sense. Because one who participates in killing another animal must also be punished in turn. It has been said that a cruel and wretched person who maintains his existence at the cost of others' lives deserves to be killed for his own well-being, otherwise he will go down by his own actions. So, remember, don't offer this to God or even to devotees of God. See, here is Hanuman and somebody is trying to offer him hamburgers. You think Hanuman eats hamburgers? Hanuman doesn't eat hamburgers because Hanuman is a great devotee of God. Therefore, he'll eat only prasad that has been offered to his Lord. He'll only eat prasad that's been offered to Ram, to Vishnu, to Krishna. So don't expect that God will eat that. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that he speaks to Arjuna and he says, Patram pushpam phalam toyam yo me bhakti prayachati tadaham bhakti upatam ashtami pratatmana. If you offer me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, a fruit or water, I'll accept it. That is the most important part. So you may think it's an ordinary cauliflower pakora, but in actual fact it's not. It's been offered with love and devotion to God on an altar, no matter how simple it is. And it doesn't have to be offered in a very complicated way. It can be offered by you and your family, just like this little family is doing. They're offering it with love and devotion to God. And then they're eating this prasad, just like you should in your home, and I hope you will from today onwards. In this way, not only are you feeding the body, but you're also feeding the soul. This is an example of this woman who spent her life dusting the cage and polishing the cage and neglecting the parrot in the cage. So what happened to the parrot? He was in misery. So also we actually polish our cage, that's the body, but we don't feed the bird. But when we eat prasad, we simultaneously feed the cage and the bird. This is the miracle of prasad. Because prasad is different because it is in touch with God. Just like this iron rod, when placed in fire, it acquires the characteristics of fire. So also this prasad, because it's been tasted by God, it has acquired the qualities of God. Doesn't matter what background you come from. You may say that, you have come from vegetarian background. From infancy I've been eating meat. And therefore I have always been taught that you should eat meat. You can see this cartoon here. That this Eskimo child is being told by the mother, every day you should eat something from the 5 basic groups. Fried blubber. Blubber is what? It's the fat of the whale. Fried blubber, boiled blubber, stewed blubber, baked blubber and raw blubber. People who are brought up in a non-vegetarian culture, they have been taught by their mothers that you must eat meat, eat meat, eat meat. So what is the hope for such people? You might say that, I've been brought up in a non-vegetarian background, so it's very difficult for me to give up eating meat. But it's not really. You may be an Eskimo who's been used to eating only meat, but so what? You can be purified. This is the example of Narad Muni, who meets this great hunter, who is half slaughtering animals. And he purifies him. He tells him that from today onwards, eat only vegetarian food. Give up the slaughter of animals. And eat food which has been offered to God with love and devotion. When he comes back, he finds that this person, he actually is not willing to offer obeisances to Narad Muni because there are ants in the path. He tries to take the ants out of the path very gently before he offers his respects. So it doesn't matter where you come from, what background you come from. By chanting the holy name of God, by offering food with love and devotion, you will become purified and you will acquire a taste for Krishna Prasad. And you will actually enjoy it. We are not telling you not to enjoy. Enjoy the taste of spiritual life. Enjoy wonderful foodstuffs, but wonderful foodstuffs that have been offered to God. And in this way, you will discover the unity among all living entities. The question that's being asked is that if everybody gives up drinking, if everybody gives up, the question that's being asked is that if everybody gives up drinking, if everybody gives up smoking, then what happened to those poor people who are working in the factories which are producing cigarettes and which are producing alcohol? It's very simple. They will switch over to another industry. This is what is happening today. Actually, even the tobacco companies are becoming smart. If you see Indian Tobacco Company, ITC, or if you see any of these things, they are diversifying. They are reducing their income from cigarettes and they are going into hotels, they are going into leasing, they are going into so many branches because they have realized that this is a profession where it's going to die out. So don't worry, God will look after everybody. You don't have to take that responsibility. You follow the laws of God and God will look after you. Because there are adequate professions for you to take up. There's unlimited professions, there's unlimited industry. You don't have to do the things which are required for the harm and degradation of other people. So you can be assured that people are already switching over. That tobacco companies are already diversifying. So their employees will never be hurt. Don't worry about them. Any other questions? Huh? I told you we are not against animal products. We are not against animal products. Milk is an animal product. But milk has been especially recommended for human diet. Who has recommended? Lord Krishna has recommended. Therefore, he is a cowherd boy. We are not trying to become vegans. We are not trying to become vegetarians, we are trying to become devotees of Krishna. This is not a lecture about becoming vegetarian or becoming vegan. This is a lecture about acquiring love of God, for acquiring love of Krishna. That is what this lecture is about. Therefore, onions and garlic are vegetarian, but I am telling you, give that up. So, I am not specifically telling you to give up non-vegetarianism. I am actually trying to instruct you to become a devotee of God, devotee of Krishna. Any other questions? Onion and garlic are tamasic foods. When you eat onion and garlic, what happens? The lower centers are actually stimulated in your brain and spinal cord. You are actually overcome by passion and ignorance when you eat onion and garlic. In fact, if I am not mistaken, in the Bhagavata Purana, onion and garlic are actually condemned. It's practically like eating meat if you eat onion and garlic as far as spiritual life is concerned. Yes, any other questions? Well, there is no specific objection to eating chili. Although chili is not a tamasic food, it's certainly a food which is in the mode of passion. So, as you advance on the spiritual path, you will give that up in turn. But I don't expect you to give it up immediately. Immediately I want you to give up meat, fish, eggs, onion, garlic. Yes. Later on, when you advance, then okay, you can give up chili also. In fact, most of us, we hardly eat any chili in our diet. Because that will come naturally.
One person is a weak second. One is a one merchant.
Yes.
Now they are coming Krishna consciousness. So they are asking me whether they should continue or not, they should continue.
The question is that he has a friend who's a meat seller and he's got another friend who's a wine merchant. So he wants to know that now that they have become Krishna conscious, should they change their profession or not? Yes, they must change their profession. They have to change their profession. If you are a bartender, if you are a wine merchant, if you are a butcher, if you are a meat seller, if you are a prostitute, you cannot continue these professions. You must give them up. Because these professions are not beneficial towards development of God consciousness. If you are serious about God, if you just want to make a show and do little arti and show people you are pious, and you carry a jap mala in one hand and with the other hand you are saying, yes sir, you can have this bottle of scotch. It doesn't do. If you are serious about God, then you have to give up these things. And don't think it's difficult. God will help you if you are serious. God will help you if you are serious. God will see that you do not suffer materially. God will see that you do not lose anything because you are doing it out of love for Him. Because Krishna says, Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana paryupasate tesham nityabhiyuktanam yogakshemi vahamiyam. He said, don't worry, if you are worshipping with unlawed devotion, I will preserve what you have and I will provide what you lack. So God will preserve what you have, God will provide what you lack, don't worry. He will give you the intelligence by which you can change your profession without having to suffer for it. Any other questions?